All right, I took one day break from the Ukraine war and from geopolitics globally, and I missed quite a bit. I had to talk about the Elon Musk news. There's more Elon Musk news today, but I'm not going to get into that. There's plenty of other people who will talk about it. I said my piece, I think, for now on the Musk issue. But as far as what I didn't talk about yesterday with the Ukraine war, the Moskva, I believe that's how you say it. It's Moscow in Russian was the name of the ship that reportedly caught fire. They had to evacuate all of the soldiers. That much is agreed upon by both sides. The dispute was what started the fire and also whether or not the ship had sunk, at least initially. The Russians, I think at first, either didn't say or outright said the ship hadn't sunk and it was being towed to port. And the Ukrainians had said that, they blew it up with a missile and it sunk within 20 minutes. That was what I was hearing from the Ukrainian side. And, I don't know anything about, Navy ships and how hard they are to sink. And, I've always thought that, the U.S. building up such a big Navy and all these aircraft carriers and things were silly, because if you actually had to go to war with a real country where you needed these aircraft carriers, like aircraft carriers, I guess they work well against Iraq, but against a real country like China or Russia, I would think a missile would be able to take out a big ship like that, any of them. And so, on the surface, it seemed somewhat plausible that the Ukrainians could blow up a Russian naval ship with a missile. But really, I don't know. We don't have the details. We don't have evidence either way. It's he said, she said. So I don't know what caused the initial fire. It's also plausible that because this ship was 40 or 50 years old, naval ships catch on fire and sink. It's not unheard of. I've heard of that quite a bit, in the U.S. military over the years. There was actually a pretty notable example a few years ago where quite a few guys were killed. And nobody had shot at the ship. This was just in the middle of the Pacific, a U.S. Navy ship. There was a fire, and people died. And I can't remember if the ship ended up sinking or not. And also there was the USS Maine, which you can either say that it was an accident or it was sabotaged, but I think pretty much everybody agrees that the USS Maine was not blown up by by the Spaniards in the port of Havana. That's what we were told at the time, because the U.S. wanted to go to war with Spain. The U.S. put the USS Maine. I don't even know. Who knows why the hell the USS Maine was even in Cuba, considering that was Spanish territory. This is a warship in what I believe was the territorial waters of the Spanish Empire, and it blew up. Now the forensic investigations seem to reveal that it was actually just a fire on the ship, which ignited the ammo stored in the ship, and that created an explosion, blew it up, and it sank. So these things happen. So I don't know. Could go either way with the Moskva. The Russians, though, now admit that it did sink. Although Alexander Mercurius of the Duran pointed out something that, because I didn't go and double check the weather, the Russians blamed it on poor weather conditions, that they were trying to tow this ship back to port because it had been immobilized by the fire, and that it was just really rough seas that day, and the ship ended up sinking, because of that. And I guess Alexander or somebody else, but Alexander pointed this out, that, well, if you just looked at the weather report that day for that area in the Black Sea, it was not especially stormy. So that part of the Russian story doesn't seem to really hold up. So I can't say anything more on the Moskva than that. But to be honest, what my main concern right now, more than Ukraine at this point, is China. And I guess you could say my concern is Taiwan, but I don't really, Taiwan less so. Yes, Taiwan is where all the semiconductors come from, but let's say if the Chinese took over Taiwan, and there was an interruption of chips from Taiwan, that would short-term create a lot of pain, because everything is now in the modern economy, largely because of regulations. U.S. government regulations. It uses chips. Things are computer controlled. Your refrigerator is controlled by a computer. Your car is controlled by computers. Everything's controlled by computers. The analog past in which things, worked, and when they broke, you could just use a screwdriver and fix them. that has been rejected in favor of a present which is dominated by the Taiwanese semiconductor industry. And so it would create a lot of disruptions if the West lost Taiwan as a manufacturing hub. But what we could get by? We could just switch to analog. We could economize on semiconductors and not put them in literally everything. Maybe we go back to carbureting our cars and diesel trucks using mechanical fuel injection. These things worked fine before we had chips. Points distributors get the job done, and they're cheap. We can have mechanical refrigerators. We don't need to have the Internet of Things. We can get by without that. And so, chips would become very expensive, but there would still be some chips coming into the country, and we could economize on them. That we could get by with. But the problem is, our government would react far more harshly. Our government, in response to the Chinese taking Taiwan, which the Chinese have made it clear they're going to do at some point, perhaps sometime in the near future, is Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, who is the administrator of sanctions, has basically said that China is going to get the Russia treatment. And I've talked about this before. They're going to try and make China into a pariah state in the West. And so what does that mean? That means that we lose pretty much all our consumer goods. It's that simple. We just in America no longer can consume things. And, it would just be overnight. And it sounds nuts. It sounds completely unreasonable. But looking at what has been done in the case of Russia, how can you doubt that they would do it to China now? Because, for Europe, certainly, Russia is very, very important. And the Europeans have, the EU has made it clear they're ready to completely cleave off, their right arm, which has been, attached to Russia for so long. I mean, the EU now is talking about a full ban on Russian oil imports. That's the end of European industry. The factories are going to close. No more Russian coal imports? Yeah, okay, that's fine. It's just, you're going to have brownouts. Europe is going to look a lot more like South America. It's that simple. And, you want to know an idea, you want an idea of what the future of Europe's like? Go to Argentina. Argentina's full of, white European people. They speak a European language. They have, European-looking architecture. Nice weather. I have to say that. I wouldn't mind living in Argentina if it wasn't economically backward, and if I, spoke Spanish, which I don't really like the sound of the Spanish language, to be honest. I never had much interest in learning it. I like Germanic languages. I don't mind the sound of Portuguese, but not a ton of countries that speak that. Just basically Portugal and Brazil. But nevertheless, you go down in Argentina, you've got essentially a lot of impoverished white Europeans with nice architecture. That's the future of Europe. It's that simple. If you don't produce things, if you don't have energy, you're poor. I mean, what, is everybody in Europe just going to become a stockbroker or a banker? That's about the only thing that they're going to have left that they can do. But they can't even really do that because they're going to sanction, all of the world that actually does stuff. If they're sanctioning Russia and eventually sanctioning China over Taiwan, Europe has no future. And we here in the United States are in for a world of pain as well. I think we have a future. I think we have a bright future, actually. I think that things have to get worse before they get better. But ultimately, in the long run, things will work out okay here. But between the loss of energy from essentially closing off Russian energy to Western markets, putting strains on the remaining suppliers, and the potential for just closing off China. Nixon went and opened China. It was pretty easy to open China. I mean, it was no small diplomatic feat. But my point is, it didn't make a massive wave immediately. But closing China, trying to shut it back again, that's going to create a massive vacuum, a vacuum of prosperity. It's going to suck the life out of the dollar, basically, because there's not going to be. What will you be able to buy with your dollars? You won't be able to buy computers, and you won't be able to buy heavy manufactured goods, because we don't have heavy manufacturing here in the United States. We don't make this stuff. There's no political tolerance for making this stuff. That's why we don't do it anymore. It's not that people don't want to. In fact, I don't talk about my business life, but I manufacture things. It's a business. We'd like to manufacture more stuff here. It's just not it's not possible. You can't just go out and say, I want to start making, what's something simple? Motorcycles. Motorcycle, that's not a very complicated thing. It's got two wheels, it's got a motor, transmission, a chain. And, how did the original, how did the company like Harley-Davidson get started? I don't know exactly, but, basically you had these two guys come together, Harley and Davidson, and they said, we want to build motorcycles in America, because that's where they lived. And they did it. It's not going to happen these days. Certainly, people used to start car companies. Imagine that. Elon Musk started a car company, as we all know, in the 2000s. And has it ever turned a profit? Maybe last year it did. Tesla's been extremely unprofitable. It's not. The American system is not set up for new businesses. The American system is built to support an entrenched oligarchy. It's meant to preserve certain moneyed interests, and for everybody else, essentially, to be left out in the cold. And so private enterprise, it's not exactly like we can just respond. I was thinking again, something simple. A simple manufactured thing, something that doesn't have a ton of parts, and that the parts are not that complicated. Briggs & Stratton, they make their lawnmower motors. Of course, now you have all these lawnmowers that are supposed to be electric. Oh, you gotta go electric. Don't be a zombie. I saw a commercial by Skill, which is owned by a Chinese company called Shervon, and they were saying, "Don't be a gas zombie. Buy an electric lawnmower." Those electric lawnmowers are gone if we sever relations with China. China invades Taiwan, your electric lawnmower is gone. Your electric string trimmer gone. Your electric blower gone. And once your batteries go dead that you've got, you're not getting any more batteries. That's it. And then you'll be back to your Briggs & Stratton lawnmower that you've used for 80 years. Except Briggs & Stratton, you ever look a little closely these days? It says on there, Briggs & Stratton, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But if you look a little closer, it says made in China. Okay? So we don't even make small, tiny little lawnmower engines. That's not a complicated thing to manufacture. Yet we still make it in China. Briggs & Stratton has a factory over there. And guess what? If the U.S. decides to sanction China or whatever, Briggs & Stratton's factory is going to get seized. It's going to be nationalized. They already have to be in a partnership with the Chinese in order to do that, because you can't have wholly owned, foreign assets over there anyway. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the exact law, but it has to be a joint, what's the term? Joint venture, with some domestic Chinese Communist Party connected firm. And so you'll have all these companies that have invested in all their manufacturing, moving and outsourcing to China, that are going to have their assets seized in China. And how then are they going to be able to invest in moving manufacturing back to the United States? They'll be tapped out. A lot of them will go bankrupt. And then you'll say, well, then who's going to start new businesses? Because that's pretty much impossible because of current regulation. How are you going to, if you want to try and replace Briggs & Stratton and make lawnmower engines, or God forbid, make the whole lawnmower? Because think about the liability there. Oh my gosh, you've got a spinning blade. You have to be a really big company to do that. So let's say that you don't do that. Let's say, you've got Craftsman, which is owned by who now? Stanley Black & Decker. Craftsman is still owned. Big Craftsman lawnmowers. They sell them at Lowe's. They used to sell them at Sears. Very common to see a Craftsman lawnmower for most of my lifetime. They need new engines because they can't get those electric things. They don't have those battery ones anymore that they were importing from China. They make the mower decks here, I think in Alabama. So they need motors to put on them. Briggs and Stratton, they're out of luck. Their factory in China has been seized. Now they don't have any money because all their assets were tied up over there. And so somebody new steps forward and says, you know what, I can make your lawnmower engine. It's simple. It's only a few, it's only a few parts. Especially if you built a 2-cycle motor or something. Remember old 2-cycle lawnmowers? They were simple. They had a spark plug, a crankshaft, a piston. That was about it. Well, this new startup company, it's not as simple as being able to make this product so that we can have our lawnmowers. They then have to go through the EPA. And the EPA is going to put them through years of trials and hell and, probably millions of dollars in testing. And in the meantime, maybe they run out of money, with testing, and their investors say, you know what, we're not going to keep funding this. They go out of business, and then somebody else buys it up, and blah, 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 blah. Oh, meanwhile, nobody's grass is getting cut because we don't have lawnmowers. Okay, I know this seems like a stupid example. What does this have to do with anything? I just thought of the first thing that came to mind when, just for any random thing that you wouldn't think of, that would be the instant ramification. Imagine this across the entire economy, your entire life, everything that you do that is powered by made in China products. And remember, even if something says made in USA, it usually isn't. Made in USA can mean, it's made over in China, and then they don't do the final step of assembly and put the 3 pieces together to make the whole product. But they make, they do all the intricate manufacturing on each of those 3, main components, and then they ship them over here, and if they have an American essentially slap them together and throw it in a box and call it Made in America. All those so-called Made in America goods, they're gone too. We just don't have anything then, and we have to start over making them ourselves. And then you have the federal government telling you no, because you've got the Greens largely, you've got the labor movement, all these people telling you no, no, no. The Greens who are happy to see Europe's manufacturing, what's left of it, turned off because they hate it. They don't want people to do anything. They want to live in their high-rise condos and drive their electric car or ride the electric bus to work. Meanwhile, everybody else, I don't know, is supposed to be eating bugs. And just none of this makes sense. It's fantasy land. We are being governed by people. Once you figure this out, it makes a huge difference. Most people think, hey, our leaders, I might not agree with them or understand what they're doing, but, they have some idea in mind. They might have the wrong idea. They might be incorrect. But they have some idea of what they're doing. No, they have no idea what they're doing. These people are infantile. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. What really hit this home for me was the one time I met someone who was on the board of the Federal Reserve. It was almost a life-changing experience, because it finally hit me, because I always thought, these guys, they must have some idea of some reasoning behind what they're doing. And he confirmed me, no, not really. It's just trial and error. We're just, we're just going to tweak this screw a little bit, see if the economy gets better. If it gets worse, we're going to turn the screw back the other way. That's how the Fed sets interest rate policy. They have no real logic or, no real theory as to, why the interest rate should be, at any certain point at any given time. They don't understand what interest rates mean. They don't care. And think about it. The people at the Fed are some of the probably the most serious people, in the American elite class. Because, even if you're a ridiculous fairy tale believing economist, you're still an economist at the end of the day. You have to have some modicum of logical comprehension. But the people running our foreign policy don't even have that. I don't know how else to put it. We're screwed. I don't know where to go from here. I don't know how to plan. In my personal life, how to plan for business. I deal with stuff that's made in China. I would be out of business if we had, a break in relations with China. And the worst part is, it's not just like, okay, well, maybe we can't get things made in China, we'll just go to another country. Oh, you mean another country like Vietnam, which is right next door to China, or India, or Thailand, or Bangladesh? India's, on the road to being sanctioned too. And that's the next big thing as far as, manufacturing is going to. There's a lot more things that are being made in India. We're not going to have access to that either. I mean, so what's next? Zimbabwe? Well, if you go there, they'll seize your assets too. You can't invest in Zimbabwe. Although I guess Mugabe's dead now, but not so sure how much faith I have in the current military dictator there, or any of these other countries. I mean, the reason why companies were able to move, to China en masse with their manufacturing, is because the Chinese are serious people, and you could be fairly certain that they were not going to break their contracts. Now, they do when it comes to things like intellectual privacy, but that's because intellectual privacy, people don't understand, that is a Western legal principle. It doesn't exist in the East, this idea of intellectual property. Intellectual property goes back to the English law of monopolies, or law on monopolies. I forget what it was called exactly. But this was a part of the idea that, the king could grant an individual, one of his subjects, a monopoly on some given, part of the economy. And part of that was intellectual property. Just like the king granted a merchant a monopoly on the distribution of shovels, he could grant a merchant or an author, a monopoly on the printing of a particular book. And this is just not something that comes from Chinese law. So no, the Chinese are not going to respect it. But as far as, more basic universal, laws of contract and things, they've been reliable. If you make a contract with the Chinese to deliver X amounts of widget A on day Z, the widgets tend to arrive. I mean, I feel like I'm rambling, but I mean, these are important examples. I mean, I'm trying to articulate why China is currently so important to the global economy, and more importantly to the American economy, because that's really all I care about. That's where I live. I mean, I do feel bad for people when other people have, like what's going on in Yemen or what's been done in Somalia. I feel terrible for those people, but it doesn't directly affect me. I'm not feeling bad for myself. This I'm talking about, devastation being wreaked, where I live. And so what'll be the result? I think the result is simple. The center will not hold. The U.S. will have to adjust to the new reality if they really do try and cut us off from China. I don't think that there will be any going back. I think that once those ties are severed, it's going to very quickly, people are going to very quickly realize that our lifestyle is not sustainable. And the second that people meet resistance from the federal government in trying to better their lives, and trying to replace these things, in trying to mow their grass, and trying to, what other things could there be? I mean, literally anything. Everything's made in China. In trying to fix their car was, another example. I always give transportation or automotive or mechanical sorts of, answers, because those are simple things that I can think of, like that I deal with. Or it could be anything. It could be ladders. It could be a hammer. All this crap you have to go through government red tape to do it. And people at the end of the day are going to say, you know what? No, we need this stuff. We need to make things. And we don't care what you're going to do. We're going to go ahead and do it because we have nothing to lose. We've already lost everything. Now we're trying to gain back some of what we lost by producing. And I think that, certainly under this worst case scenario, there would be 100%, self-inflicted. The United States government would go bankrupt. No one would want to save it. And it would just cease to exist. That's what this is. It's suicidal. I mean, there's no other way to look at this. Every government has its breaking point. Every government has its limits. Governments have to be aware of their own mortality if they seek to avoid it. The U.S. government is arrogant. The elites think that they're invincible. They think that whatever the people, who control the levers of power, at the head of the state, Whatever they whim can be divined into reality, and that's simply not true. The U.S. elite are confined by reality just as much as anyone else is the elite of any other country. And so they're absolutely going to be overstepping the limits of their power in trying to take on China. I used to think that they understood this. This is why I didn't worry too much. I figured, hey, whatever happens, happens. People aren't, the people in power aren't stupid enough to blow everything up, because that would be destroying their own power too. It's not just, destroying the standards of living of the average American. If America is poor, the American government, what good are they if they preside over a bankrupt nation? And moreover, the federal government has the most to lose. Their position is more fragile even than the average American at this point because of the debt. All it takes is a little spike in interest rates. 4% on the 10-year, 5% on the 10-year. That's it. You realize how minute of a deviation from, the present state of affairs that is? You realize how ephemeral the existence of Washington, D.C. is? I think that Russia and China understand that. I think they understand that Washington, D.C., their existence is fleeting. They're sickly. It is a frail old empire. The United States looks like the Ottomans, in the early 20th century. And Joe Biden really does embody that. And I don't want people to confuse. I'm not saying that, America itself, like the land and the place, and all the people who live here, we're not going to go away. We're still going to be here. And we could be rich again. That's certainly possible. But the current regime, which has been in power since World War II, I don't consider it going all the way back to 1776. It's silly. If you listen to these people talk, they don't really trace their lineage back to 1776 or even back to 1865 at this point. Or 1860, I guess you could say. The current regime really began with World War II. That is the current regime's creation myth. And I think that this regime will take down the entire, not just itself, but all of, the U.S. government institutions. The White House will cease to be the White House. Congress will cease to be Congress. It will be meaningless. Their checkbook, is going to be mud. And I know I've been rambling a lot in this, but I mean, it's that dire. And the more I hear U.S. officials talking about this, the more concerned I will get. So this is going to be the last time that I talk about this, unfortunately. But with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.